be 10 when I started.
Okay.
10 years ago, it was 10.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson this morning. Introducing the panel members, to my left is Mr. Stu McPherson, and to his left is Mr. Doug Marks. And representing the City of Winnipeg from the Assessment Department is Mr. Rob Lucky. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we'll limit discussions to those matters. The statements that the applicant or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons as assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it, along with the City Administration. We make our decisions based on the evidence provided at this hearing and issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision in respect to application may be appealed to the municipal board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to application for exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing this morning, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant. Following the swearing in, we'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the other applicant may have, and it will be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each party will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket this morning. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. I'll ask our secretary to swear in Mr. Lucky and to either affirm him or swear him in, and have Mr. Smith sworn in. Oh, right.
Please state your name.
Robert L. Lucky.
Yeah, you. Yeah.
So,
You. Please state your name. You swear that the evidence you will present is the truth and
I do.
you.
I neglected to say that our recording secretary is Katie Sutherland. All right, we'll go to the first item on the docket, which is Raleigh Street, 1380. Raleigh, the floor is yours, Mr. Lucky.
Thank you. 1380 Raleigh Street is file number 193274. That's roll number 0400199850. We have assessment of $7,910,000. This is 9 buildings, 2 stories, and these are townhouse. It's a townhouse, Manitoba Housing Townhouse project. It was built in 1972, and there's 66 units. I have a picture. This is, I think, Google Street View. And then I've outlined the site. This is Raleigh and Springfield in North Kedowin area. This is all model generated. We'll talk a bit more about the first one, and then the rest are all the same. The income is based on ability to pay, so there's no market rent. The people pay a percent of their income. If they make $1,000 a month, their rent's $270. So we use model rent, model expenses, and in every case we agree on the NOI. So every building.
In every case, you're
Yes.
saying?
Every building.
Okay.
So the difference is cap rate, and these are our model cap rates. This one is 5.3. Being that the building is built in 1972, it's at the top end of the 5.3 cap rate. So at 1975, it would drop to 5%. 1975 and newer is 5%. 1949 to 1974 is 5.3. There'll be a couple that are lower, but that's based on size. We'll get to that when we get to those. So at the end, there's some permits, nothing out of the ordinary. Anyway, I would ask that you maintain our assessment of $7,910,000.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Smith, questions?
Just very briefly, I guess. So the subject property is, this is all model-driven evaluation for it, as you'd said.
Right.
And it's all townhomes property, as you mentioned.
Right, I'm somewhat familiar with, I've never been in all the units, but I've been by it. I've done work on this project in the past.
Okay. And capitalization rate of 5.3%. Again, that's driven by the year and the size. I believe you mentioned.
Right. Yeah. Our model has breaking points for age, location, and size.
Okay. Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McPherson?
The cap rate that's applied to townhouses, is it the same criteria or same stratification as apartments?
It is.
Okay. And you said age, size, and location. Location being...
The only difference in location is there's a slight premium for St. Boniface, and then there's, when I mean premium, it's slightly lower, but close. And then there's an extra, the cap rate's higher for area 7, which is kind of the core of the north end. So we don't have either of those here. So these are all our normal cap rates.
Okay, so these are all in the same, considered to be the same area?
Yeah, right, yeah. There's no North End or St. Boniface, plus or minus to the cap.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marks?
No.
Okay. Mr. Lucky, I maybe missed the first part, but are these all Manitoba housing units? Majority of them?
They all are.
They all are.
They're all-
Yeah, every property is Manitoba.
So
housing.
you had said that it's on the ability to, it's based on their income?
Right.
The rent structure? Okay.
It's called RGI, rent
Okay.
geared to income.
Yeah. But you also said that you're, I think, in the majority of these cases that we're going to be dealing with, your NOIs are close to the same?
Same.
Is that exactly the same?
Right,
Exactly the same, on all of them?
right.
Okay. So it's just a question of cap rate then?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. That's a little
So
unusual.
I would ask that you accept our cap rate.
Okay. All right. Mr. Smith, The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. I'll just cover some basics here to start with. As mentioned, each of the properties being heard today is owned by Manitoba Housing and operated by them. And as Mr. Lucky had mentioned, all of them are operated on a rent here to income basis, so there is no in-place income on which to base valuation or to determine whether it's at market level of rent, essentially. So we have to look to the market and look at the how the property has been valued by the city and make a determination as to whether that is fair or not. So we've done that, and looking at the properties today, and we can go through them as we come through them. There is the income and expense side. While we have slightly different viewpoints, is consistent in that the NOI is appropriate for each of them. So we are in agreement on that front. We will have some comments, or rather I will have some comments as we go through it, but that is our starting point. So I realize the unusual nature of that, but when you have
a little unusual.
When you have very standard properties, it is what it is, essentially, right? We have done the checks and balances as we go through. So let's begin, obviously, with 1380 Raleigh Street, Manitoba Housing property built in 1972. As mentioned, we have 66 units here. They are all townhome units, and they range between 2 and 5 bedrooms. So we have a total of 18 two-bedroom units, 30 three-bedroom units, 12 four-bedroom units, and 6 five-bedroom units. Now, in the Winnipeg marketplace, looking at properties that have rental units that have 3 bedrooms and 3+ bedrooms, 3 and above bedrooms in the marketplace. There are certainly fewer of them out there, which coincides with a lower demand for properties of that type in the marketplace. And this is borne out by there being less demand in the marketplace. You certainly don't see product of this type being built in this time frame. We're at a time of expansion in the Winnipeg marketplace for rental accommodation, and you're really seeing very, very little construction of properties that have 3, 4, 5 bedrooms, because the demand simply isn't out there. It doesn't provide the same level of certainty of a return to an investor. So the product both is not a lot of it to start with from times past, and there's very little of it being constructed. This is for a reason. There's less demand. So that would speak, pardon me, that obviously speaks to valuation as well, in terms of there's lower demand in the marketplace for renting of these properties, then that would speak to the value to an investor as well, in that they would typically end up with greater periods of vacancy, etc., over the life of the property. The other aspect to consider with regard to townhomes is we're not looking at a single structure here with a single roof, a boiler system, all the standard features that one would have in a normal apartment block. You're looking at 9 different buildings here in this particular case, each with its own roof. Each of the units has its own hot water tank, furnace, etc. All of these parts break down. These have higher costs to the owner, etc. And those have to be borne by the owner as they go forward. So looking at the subject property, we have some photographs beginning on page number 4. Property was built in 1972 and is essentially original to that time frame, with the exception of changing of some fridges and ranges, things of that nature, as they wear out and or break down. You can see the level of finish inside. Manitoba Housing, when they build their properties, they're looking to maximize the number of people and families that they can house in the space that they have available. So the bedrooms tend to be smaller. The finish levels are the lower end materials and are meant to last for a period of time rather than being higher end and generating greater income, as that's not the mandate of Manitoba Housing. Their mandate is to supply low-cost housing to those residents of Winnipeg and Manitoba that are in need of such accommodation due to their circumstances. So, property is basically original. The site is shown on page number 9. Obviously, it fronts on Raleigh and runs west off of there with a laneway out front, and is located immediately north of a Manitoba Hydro substation, which you can see just to the south of it there on page number 9. Page 10 gives you an aerial of the location for the subject. Looking at the valuation portion for the project, we did look at the rental level that is assigned by the city for the subject property, and the overall average of $1,168 per month per unit. When we look at the size of the units, the condition of them, location, etc., it did appear to be appropriate for the subject property in the marketplace. Looking at the actual revenue for the property, and I won't go through each of these, but it holds true as you go forward. Again, they're operated on a rent geared to income basis, so the revenue that the city and ourselves are projecting for the property is $925,222. This is located on page number 12. The actual revenue collected in the appropriate year was $294,721. Now, obviously this reflects their mandate, but you can see that they're not producing anywhere close to that from the property itself. The vacancy is set at 2.6% for the subject property, which is appropriate based on market evidence, and we are in agreement with the expense allowance as well. We can move on to capitalization rate, which will apply kind of across the board for all of our properties today. We'll cover some ground here that we won't cover multiple times, as we have 6 or 7 properties ahead of us, all based on the same material. If I can direct you to my page number 14, we have somewhat unique properties in that they are not standard market apartments. They are affordable housing properties, social and affordable housing properties, essentially. So I'm just going to run through a bit of detail here for you. Determining market value for affordable housing properties for assessment is difficult, as there's not a lot of transactions of them on the marketplace. Those that do happen are not based on any in-place income and expense, so there are no capitalization rates to be developed from them. So there are no directly comparable sales to utilize in determining market value. Additionally, they can't legitimately be compared to standard market apartment transactions, as social housing properties have considerable restrictions and burdens that aren't present for standard market apartments. These include rental income restrictions, rental market restrictions, that being smaller pool of tenants that one can rent to, additional operating expenses. Typically, operating expenses are higher for this class of property based on the market segment that it serves. Physical condition tends to be lower with greater wear and tear on these properties, again, due to the market segment served. And finally, you have disposition restrictions at the end. If one were to look at selling the properties such as this with tenants in place, those tenants have legal right to remain in place under the structure that they currently occupy their unit under. If you look at the middle of my page number 14, I'm just going to read a short segment from an appraiser, Mr. Richard Polton. He's an accredited appraiser, MAI, out of the United States. And he's an expert in this particular field. He's written a book called Valuation and Market Studies for Affordable Housing. And in this he states, developing a market-derived cap rate for an income-restricted property begins with an analysis of the available rates for similar unrestricted properties. Then these rates are adjusted based on the risk factors that an investor would consider in developing a cap rate. The result is a capitalization rate based on market factors and associated risks. In the final analysis, property tax assessment must take into account the public purpose of the project, overall benefits and burdens, and the restricted nature of the operating rents. So the point of this is, in looking at valuation for public housing properties or social housing properties, if you take identical properties side by side, one of them being a standard market apartment, one of them being a social housing property such as this, or public housing, there are factors and greater risks that impact the social housing property that drive the cap rate higher. If you are an investor and you're on the market and you have identical properties side by side, you're going to attribute a higher cap rate in your purchase of the social housing, public housing property than you are for the market apartment. Moving forward, we have produced our own capitalization rate study. It's shown at the middle of page number 14 there. We have a range of 6 properties. They are all investment properties. They were purchased for the in-place income. They were not purchased for any future lift in value through renovation and an increase to the rental structure and an increase to the return to the investor. They were based on in-place income. So they're true capitalization rates reflective of the actual income of the property. And our cap rate range is between 5.44% up to 6.65%. The bottom end of that range at 5.44% is 333 Ward, the most recently built and largest of the properties shown, built in 2006, 103 units, and sold in 2016 for a cap rate of 5.44%. This has been discussed extensively. I'm happy to go through it for you gentlemen again if you wish. And I'll wait to see if there's questions on that. The remainder of the properties there obviously are smaller and somewhat older in terms of development. However, they have been upgraded and renovated at the time of sale, so they're not indicative of property from 1929, 28, 51, etc. There have been improvements done to them. The range that we have developed, these are not obviously all of the transactions in the marketplace, but we feel they are representative of the range of capitalization rates paid in the city for investment grade apartments. That range being roughly 5.5% up to 6.5, 6.6%. Following this, we present the material from 2 of the main commercial brokerages, real estate brokerages in the city and in the country. Colliers and C.B. Richard Ellis, they both produce capitalization rate reports. And if you look at the information provided on pages 15 and 16, you can see that they're essentially indicating a flat line in terms of capitalization rates between the 2016 year and the 2018 year, which is representative of our 2018 and 2020 assessment cycles. So looking on page number 15, the two charts indicate that in Winnipeg we're looking at cap rates for high rises between 5 to 5.75% in 2016, 5 to 6% in 2018. Low rises ranging between 5.25% and 6% in 2016 and 5 and 6% in 2015. I would also point out, with regard to the Colliers information, that as has been presented before this board numerous times, the capitalization rates that are presented are inclusive of some additional costs that are not typically included in cap rate studies, and they have the effect of lowering the cap rate by roughly a quarter point. So one can add a quarter point to those cap rate ranges as well. These costs are inclusive of closing costs, land transfer costs, etc. The page number 16, looking at the C.B. Richard Ellis information, again, essentially a flat line. If you look at the 2016 rates for apartments, we have low rises from 5 to 5.75%, or sorry, that's high rise, 5 to 5.75%, and low rises between 5.5 and 6% for A, and 5.75 and 6% for the B class of low rises. So essentially the market is telling us that investors will pay between 5.5 and 6% for standard investment grade market apartments, and the study that we have provided is indicating a range of roughly the same, 5.44 to 6.5, 6.6%, so in the same vicinity. If you look at the bottom of page number 16 on the right-hand corner, this is again the C.B. Richard Ellis information. You can see historical Winnipeg cap rates graph. The bottom line there, the dark green one, is indicating the multifamily high-rise B capitalization rates in Winnipeg, and you can see that essentially it's indicating a flat line from roughly 2014 forwards through the Q1 of 2018. So they're really seeing no change in investor capitalization rates over that time frame. So that is the market that we're operating within. The properties that we're dealing with here are public housing, they're social housing. They have the issues that I've discussed briefly here. Happy to go over those again if you have questions. Looking at my page number 17, again, just a little bit further discussion. The location, uniqueness of the rental property, rental income restrictions, rental market restrictions, typically additional operating expenses, physical condition, often deferred maintenance, generally a lack of a reserve fund, and disposition restrictions, as well as other factors, can have a negative, or will generally have a negative impact on market value for social housing properties in the marketplace. And any prudent purchaser, knowledgeable purchaser, would assign a higher risk profile to the purchase of such an asset. So looking at the subject property, we have a townhouse property in roughly original condition from 1972 with 33 bedroom units, 12 4-bedroom units, 6 5-bedroom units out of 66. So we're looking at, what is that, 42, 48 out of 66 units being on the higher end of the range. We have utilized a capitalization rate of 6.5% as being appropriate for the subject property. And again, it's not that the area that it's located in is a terrible area or anything of that nature. It's the property that we're looking at. And 6.5% would certainly be appropriate. There are higher capitalization rates that occur out there, but those would not be appropriate for the subject. So on page number 17, we have summarized our valuation versus the cities. You can see that we come obviously to the same net operating income. And using our capitalization rate of 6.5% gives us a final market value of $6,450,000. And just flipping forward briefly, the addendum materials include the income and expense materials submitted, the Colliers and C.D. Richard Ellis market reports regarding cap rates, and finally we have some supportive decisions from other Manitoba housing properties decided in the 2020 order revision cycle. And that was my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Lucky, questions?
On your page 10, the site plan, to the west of the subject, is that a number of schools?
There are schools in the area, yes.
I can't read that, but it says something collegiate. There's a track and football field.
Yeah, that would be River East if you go far enough west there, yes.
Right. So that would be a good family rental area.
Well, I mean, certainly Manitoba Housing develops their properties in areas where there is a need for this particular product. So they
usually
develop
by school
in areas such as that as well.
Right. Okay. Just quickly on page 14, I think you touched upon it, with the exception of Ward, which I think the decision was 5 1/4, but your information's 5.44. The remainder of the 5 cap rate sales aren't really similar to the subject at all, are they?
In terms of size and location, etc., and as mentioned, none of them are going to be social housing properties.
Right.
There's really no.
So you got
cap rates to be
1929,
involved.
1928, 1951.
I do, yes, and I think we spoke about that briefly, in that each of these properties had been updated since that time and had no opportunity for a further increase to their revenue. So the basics of the kitchen, flooring, bathrooms were complete for these properties.
But isn't typically the argument that if a place is bought for increase in revenue, the cap rate is low? So with the same argument, like our cap rate sales, some of them were deemed too low because they're properties that could use renovations. And I guess from your pictures and your point is this property could be redeveloped and would warrant a low cap rate?
I take the point, but am in disagreement with it, and I guess just speak to that a bit. So with regard to the purchase of properties for repositioning in the marketplace, the cap rates that are paid for them based on the in-place net income generally do tend to be low, in that they're not buying that in-place income, they're buying the future income that they are going to generate from that property once they have renovated it. They buy it, they've already planned out what they're going to spend on it and what their revenue is going to be and what that return to themselves will be. So that's what's being purchased, not that initial revenue. So the subject property itself being a townhome, being social housing with residents that are in place with legal right to remain, restrictions on sale, typically more deferred maintenance in many cases, and a lot of standard market apartments. I wouldn't be in agreement that you would generate a lower cap rate for these type of properties.
Well, you keep talking about tenants in place. Manitoba Housing aren't bound by rent controls, are they?
Manitoba Housing itself is not bound by is not necessarily bound in the same fashion, but I have had the discussion both with themselves and with the rentals board with regard to the rights of the tenants in these types of properties, and they would have the ability to remain going forward under the current structure.
I mean, the same argument, it's geared to income. So if somebody moved in there and made $10,000 a month, their rent would be $2,700 a month, wouldn't it?
It would, but nobody would move into it if they made $10,000.
Well, that's the point. But the point is that there isn't rents in place. It's a wide open. It would be a prime property. Should Manitoba Housing choose to sell this property, as they have others recently, and the tenants are on a month-to-month, they could be evicted, and there's no rent controls, so the rents could be whatever they want.
Okay, so I'm not sure if that's a question, but they're not on month-to-month. They can't be evicted at any time, and they do have the ability to carry forward, and I strongly disagree that townhome properties such as this would be a prime redevelopment opportunity. What we're seeing in the marketplace is development of a lot of new product because people are willing to pay that upper end of rent out there in the marketplace. When you have a property such as this with small unit sizes, teeny bedrooms, etc., it's not a prime candidate for redevelopment.
Well, isn't there a lot of townhouse projects throughout Winnipeg that have been converted to condominium, sell regularly, and were rental townhouses, prime redevelopment? The fact that Manitoba Housing hasn't sold these doesn't mean there's no demand. I mean, is there a vacancy problem here?
So which question am I answering there?
Okay, you said there's low demand for these higher bedroom units. Is there a vacancy problem?
For Manitoba Housing itself, no, there is not specifically a higher than market average vacancy issue. They are generally in line with the market in that they have issues with tenants and issues with damage, etc. So
there's no vacancy issues?
No vacancy beyond a typical market vacancy for them.
Then on page 15, the cap rates you've shown here, mean, this argument about whether they should be 0.25% higher or lower, whatever. But the point is that Winnipeg, low-rise, the rates are 5.25 to 6, and you're at 6.5. Why are you above
Well,
the highest rate?
I don't want to cover the same ground over and over, but we've kind of gone through that, so we have a number of issues here. We have, again, townhome units. We have 48 out of 66 units being between 3 and 5 bedroom in the marketplace, when your typical norm is 1 and 2 bedrooms in the marketplace, having the most demand. I'm still answering the question here. The condition of the property, the demand by investors for properties of this type is not the same. For more typical standard market apartments of normal unit counts that are not public housing. And with regard to the conversion to condo issue, again, that is not in play, and that's not what we're valuing. When you're looking at that, you're looking at a complete change of the legal structure of the property, conversion of it into not a single property, but multiple properties, renovation and sale. It's an entirely different animal, so those are not market value indicators. The return to an investor that does that, which is not happening anymore because the market isn't there for it, the return to the investor on that is the lift that they achieve between what they had to pay for the property, invest into the units, and then what they sell them for, less their costs of sale, etc.
The other question I had is on page 17. You talk about Manitoba Housing having a lack of reserve funds.
They
Does
don't
Manitoba
have,
Housing not have any reserves?
No, and again, it's in the limited amount of space and time that we have, it's difficult to squish everything in. So with regard to reserve fund, they don't have specific reserve funds for individual properties. Now they have a pool of money or various pools of money that they have on an annual basis that they devote to repair and maintenance and upgrade, etc. It's never enough to maintain their entire portfolio. And given the cohort that they serve, the wear and tear does tend to mean that the properties degrade quicker than they would in a typical market circumstance. So there's less money available than in a normal
Okay.
market circumstance.
Does a typical owner of a typical multifamily building have a reserve fund?
That would vary. Some of them do, some of them don't. But in a normal market circumstance, there is profit that is made and that can be set aside for a reserve fund. In the case of social housing, that's not present. So there is no reserve fund
So buildings
set
that,
aside for them to fall back on.
so buildings that don't have reserve funds should have a higher cap rate than buildings that have reserve funds?
It's simply one of the components that one looks at in arriving at an appropriate capitalization rate.
No further questions?
I thank you. Mr. McPherson?
I'd just like to ask the assessor a couple questions first, if I may.
Sure.
First one, just if I could get a comment on the suite mix being the 4 and 5 bedrooms. Is that something that is a negative and something that could affect the cap rate, in your opinion?
Absolutely not. The reason that there is such high demand for these buildings is because the families don't have to put same-sex or different-sex kids together. They don't, brothers and sisters can have separate bedrooms. If you look at other rental townhouse projects, like Ladco's, they have high bedroom counts, like in Southdale and Fort Richmond. It's the whole point of having townhouse rentals is they're for families. They're for people that have more kids than fit into a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. So people like Ladco have recognized that and built townhouse projects with 3 and 4. I don't know if they have 5, but housing used to have a policy that keeping the kids separate. And you know, some larger families, whatnot, need 5 bedrooms. Be it that, you know, it's like a 4-bedroom, it's just that you squish more in there.
Just to follow up, Mr. McPherson's there. In your brief here, you don't have the mix correct.
We don't have a code for 5.
You don't have a code.
So it's it should say 4 plus.
Okay. Okay. No, I was wondering about, because Mr. Smith brought up that there's a real mixture in there, in regards to going up to 5 bedrooms.
Yeah, it's not like they're huge.
No, but I mean,
It's just they're smaller.
They're still classified as a 5-bedroom.
Right.
So,
yeah, they have 5 small bedrooms as opposed
some people
to
look
3
for
big
5
ones.
bedrooms, and
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mixed families, larger families. Yeah, they require that, and there's a big demand for it.
I'm sorry, Mr. McPherson.
No, not a problem, but I did have a secondary question. In your question, Mr. Smith, you mentioned that there's been recent sales of MHRC properties.
Right.
And has the department endeavored to establish a cap rate, maybe using their model-based valuation to see what these cap rates would be on that type of property?
That's the difficulty, is because of the income
No,
and
that's what I'm
expense.
saying, based
But
on their
we've
parameters.
looked at them, and we've looked at appraisals of the sales, and I can say that the cap rates in these appraisals, or specifically the one that I saw, was in line with ours.
Okay,
They're
but that's not using model-derived rentals and other parameters that you're using in valuing these properties.
It's where somebody did their own analysis of the income and expenses and used market cap. And I mean, owners, well, whatever. The properties, Manitoba Housing can, and they have been selling their properties. And I don't see a reason why they should be getting higher than typical.
Okay, so basically the answer is no, you haven't really.
We haven't done it. Well, we have informally, but nothing to present.
Okay.
And some of them are post-reference, because they're
Fair
happening right away.
Sure. And I do have a couple questions for Mr. Smith, because
you go right ahead.
that's what I should be doing.
Are they of the same? Because I'd like to add my 2 cents to that if you have the same question.
Okay, I will give you the same question. Recent sales of NHRC properties. You're aware of recent sales?
I am, yes.
That wouldn't be post-reference, hopefully?
Yes, I mean, there's been a few sales recently, perhaps a few more than in the past, and certainly some of them are post-reference. The point that I was going to make is that you cannot develop an actual capitalization rate for these properties because they're public housing and rent geared to income. So there is no market rent in place, so you can't. You're making a projection, then you can develop that cap rate, but it's not the cap rate that property was producing.
But that wasn't my question to the assessor. No, it was based on the sale price and based on the income that would be generated or the NOI it would be determined using
The
the
projected
valuation parameters that they use to
Of the city.
value the properties.
I see your point, yes.
And
With
you
regard
wouldn't
to-
have gone through that exercise either, I'm assuming.
We wouldn't make a projection of what the rental structure would have been for the property in place. Typically, if we were valuing a property like that, it would be based on whatever the organization was planning to do with it, if there were going to be changes, et cetera. Many of those properties, and there's not that many, but many of them have just simply traded to the nonprofit organization that was already in place and operating the properties, such as, I think it's 300 Selkirk, a Polish organization that was already operating that particular Manitoba Housing-owned facility. Property on Smith Street that we're all aware of with the, I think, call it 280 bachelor units out of 380 units in total, is going through an entire gutting process and renovation, changing the number of units and making loft apartments out of a significant number of them. So the total number of units there is dropping by about 100, but the rental structure obviously is going up dramatically. So there really is no, you're not buying the property in place when you're buying a property such as that for conversion. That's a good indicator that those are not reliable capitalization rate projections.
That was closer to a nickel than 2 cents.
Fair.
And I think we already have your opinion on the sweet mix. You've given us that.
I have.
So you didn't need an opportunity for me to ask anything further. But
Can you deduct that from my 5 cents? Or?
certainly. Okay, man. The questions I had for you specifically, do you know what the sizes of these units are?
For this one, we didn't have specific sizes, but if you look at the photos, the bedrooms are small. They're always small.
Well, it'd be definitely
But I
small
don't
for the
have-
5s and the 4s, and probably the 3s, but 2s and 1s, are they?
I didn't have the specific sizes given to me. It's something that I always ask for, but by and large, they are below
Understand,
average
so-
for the marketplace
Okay.
in terms of size.
And then when I look at your cap rates on page 14, well, I guess these are all apartment buildings, correct? And we know that the assessment department has said that they use the same cap rates for townhouses and apartment blocks. And
Correct.
you're of the same opinion, the townhouses and apartment blocks should have the same cap rates?
We see exceptionally few townhouse apartment complexes sell on the marketplace, so there's not one out there to point to say that there is a specific premium that's paid for it, but there's far fewer of them out there on the market. Manitoba Housing builds their properties for families. That is what their mandate is. That and the low-income singles. That doesn't mean that there is a high demand from investors in the marketplace for properties such as this. There are some out there, but there's very, very few that sell.
Right. So that was actually the second part of my question, like just to establish a baseline. I know part of your contention is that there should be a premium for extra risk for something like the social housing, and so you've given us apartment blocks, and then you said that there should be a premium added to that.
That's correct.
So I was just wondering if it was the same thing for the townhouse, when you got a baseline and then you could add a premium to that.
There would typically be, from a standard investment point of view, if you're looking at the same number of units, townhouse versus apartment, your issues with regard to the townhouse are greater with regard to With regard to future costs of roofing, systems, hot water tanks, et cetera, you just have more area and more components that require replacement and can break down greater costs. And in the multifamily world, of course, you don't have tenants that are paying for those costs. That comes directly out of your pocket. There is no lease that says you will be paying for your hot water tank or your furnace if it blows. That's directly out of the owner's pocket.
Okay, and then when I look at your chart of the 6 properties that you've used, number 2, 512 Balmoral, that's your highest one at 6.65. But would you agree that there's probably a locational premium involved there?
I would agree.
So if you ignore that, your next highest is 6.4, but you're saying that and then the social housing aspect for all the reasons that you mentioned.
Well, so it's a framing of what's appropriate for it, right? So what we presented here is a range of what is being paid in the marketplace. So yes, I would put 6.65% towards the higher end of what's being paid on the market, given its location and the property that it was, even though it was renovated. So I'm not looking at the next lowest one and saying a premium to the 6.4. It's that this is what the marketplace is showing us. This is what the main brokerages are also showing, which mirrors essentially what we're saying. The theory that we're presenting is very clear in showing that there is a premium that is appropriate with regard to cap rate above the standard market apartment capitalization rate in the assessment sphere. So that is essentially what we're showing. So townhouses, social housing, condition, size of units, it's the whole package, right? So I don't point to one specific thing and say that it's because of that one sale or this location, etc.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Marks.
I did have what they more than asked. I think Mrs. McPherson covered off a few, but that's fine. Mr. Smith, I just have to follow up Ms. McPherson's. I look at page 14, the cap rate study or your cap rate study, and I'm just I find it a little unusual, when you're developing a cap rate study, that there would be no sales probably like in 17, and the only thing that you have, you have old sales, which are fine, but they're historical in nature. Okay, so I'm saying there's only one sale that happened in 18. So it's not a good cap rate study, and we've heard about wards so much. It's like flogging a dead horse.
I take your point. So to explain that, certainly we do a lot.
Well, I know you can't create sales, okay?
I can't create sales, certainly, but what I was going to say is that we certainly do a lot of evaluation work and financing work for multifamily in our firm, and in recent time, the majority of that work has been for properties that have been purchased for repositioning in the marketplace. They've been purchased for renovation, then been renovated and had their incomes and return significantly changed. So there is that element of there not being more sales to present to you. It's also a function of whether we had access to that data or not, right? So I would love to show you 15 sales from early 2018.
I agree. Now, just before we, the subject is 66 units. So does and the highest that you have here is comparable sale number 1 in regard. It's got 103. So does the suite total economies of scale come into play here?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, but there's nothing, it's nice to sort of compare apples to apples, ideally.
I 100% agree.
Yes, okay.
Absolutely, and I endeavor to have the best information to present to you.
But you can only, you can only, work with what you have.
We can work with what we have and what's accurate and supportable, right? So there are other sales out there that we have data on, but again, they were purchased for renovation and they're not true capitalization rates.
So
we have the data.
So, just my final question. The ones that you presented here, are these any of they're not Manitoba housing, are they?
They are not.
Okay. So, but you read about this American that's doing analysis, etc., but you have to develop a cap rate, okay? And that's what you do, okay? And you adjust it accordingly.
We adjusted accordingly based on the market evidence and the theory behind what's been presented there.
Okay. I think we've beaten that up pretty good, so. Yes. Mr. Lucky, summation?
Was there another flog left in the horse? Or
There's maybe one. Summation, Mr. Lucky?
no, I think we're
Oh,
okay.
okay. Mr. Smith?
No, that's fine, thank you.
All right. We'll go on to Sutton, 331 Sutton. So, Mr. Lucky, whenever you're ready.
331 Sutton Avenue is file number 19-3359. The roll number is 040016333100. We have two buildings, two-story townhouse buildings built in 1988. Similar area, it's close to, there's 17 units, and then on the second page, there's a picture street view. It's a modern looking townhouse building. The third page shows the site plan, and just west there's schools, and it's not too far from Henderson Highway, shopping and whatnot, so great family location. And on our page 3 is again, as we said, everyone is the same. We agree on NOI and differ on cap rate. And this building, being 1988, falls into our 5% cap rate category. I would say this would be, a really good prime investment property, good location, and I would ask that you maintain our assessment of $2,013,000 or $118,400 per unit. The street mix is 2 and 3 bedrooms. If that's better or worse than the other ones. If you have any questions, try and answer them.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Smith, questions?
I have no questions.
Mr. McPherson?
Yeah, do you want to just touch on your capitalization rate evidence for us on pages 5 and 6, 5 and 5A, I guess?
Page 5 is our model, and page 5A is specific cap rates that we put in, that we use for all our properties.
Okay, so what's the intent of the 5A?
The argument was that we didn't have any actual cap rate sales. We showed our model. So at some point, to the reassessment appeal process, we put in specific cap rate sales. Our ward, which we can go through if you want, and some others.
Well, I don't necessarily want you to go through each one, but it says that these are developed through stabilizing owner-reported income and expense information. So there's still some stabilization. These aren't based on necessarily actual what was reported. Is that correct?
No, they're pretty much actual. Very, very little stabilizing.
Well, then you
We
better...
we looked at, we looked at several years, as many years as we had available, and
So then you did stabilize them if you looked at more than...
we averaged some things out. We didn't deem that something was wrong and changed it. We took actuals and stabilized the actuals.
Okay. So ward is the only common cap rate that was developed by you and, in this case, Mr. Smith. Is that correct? That's the only 333 ward is
Right.
was used here. 333 ward is okay. And there's
I had the hearing for 333 ward, and I agreed, and the owner's agent agreed at 5.23. I think the decision was 5.25.
although you're reporting here 5.
There was some stabilization. I think we were in line with Altus on that one. I think they were at 5.14.
So it's 5, 5.14, 5.25, 5.23, 5.44. Somewhere in the 5 to 5.5 range.
I think you're going to see different cap rates depending how you look at them, and especially with little buildings. Like if you stabilize the repair and maintenance a couple grand, it makes a huge swing in the cap rate, and that's the difficulty with using these little buildings for cap rate sales, is you can really swing the cap rate 1% quite quickly.
Or in the case of ward, 103 suites, you can swing in half a point.
Yeah, same argument.
I thank you. Thank you, Mr.
I thank you. Mr. Marks? No. Mr. Lucky, how is this one classified? Is it a low-rise, high-rise?
We have a specific category.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find it.
It's on
your
page 1. It says under property description on the very front of my brief. The category is CMMRH, and it's commercial row house. So it has townhouses have their own category. They're all under the commercial row house category. And when I did my comparable rental study, I used all commercial row house. You can see that they're all the same. Under page 4, parcel use CMMRH. And all the properties today are that same category, and all the rental comparables are the same category. The only difficulty, and so we have income and we have expense information for this category. What we don't have in either brief is townhouse sales.
So would you classify this as low-rise?
It'd be low-rise.
Low-rise.
Any-
A?
B.
B? Okay. So,
Yeah, I mean, Manitoba Housing would be a B. They're, they have tile flooring and basic finish.
so I've seen various cap rates, and, I'm just looking at the 20 percentile at 4.9. So I'm wondering why you wouldn't use the 4.9
We
compared to 5.
Well, we get to some that
Okay.
that are lower, and that's geared by size. And the theory
Okay.
is that as the buildings get smaller, there's a broader base of purchasers that could buy the buildings, and it tends to get more aggressive for purchasing.
Okay, I wondered that.
Lower cap rates.
Yeah, I wanted that cleared up, Mr. Lucky, because, because as we're going through here, so, okay. So,
Yeah.
you're using the 5% cap rate.
Right, it's, based on the size of this project, it's still within the 5% cap rate.
All right.
I think they go all the way down to 4.3
Okay.
or something.
We'll do with them on the individual basis anyway,
Yeah.
so. All right, I thank you. Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Looking at 331 Sutton, again, Manitoba Housing. Property built in 1988, 17 total units, and we have a more conventional split of units, with 11 of them being two-bedroom townhomes and 6 of them being three-bedroom townhomes. So we're not looking at, largely 3, 4, and 5. There are some 3s here, but it's not. We also have 2 bedrooms, 11 out of 17. So that certainly has an impact on the appropriate capitalization rate assigned, as does, as Mr. Lucky mentioned, the total size of the project. We're looking at 17 units here, not 66 or 100 or anything of that nature. So as mentioned, there is generally more investor demand in smaller size of apartment projects, and we do recognize that in considering the cap rate that's assigned. Looking at the subject itself, built in '88, not renewed since that time frame. You can see the photos beginning on page 4 of the exterior and interior, the general condition. It can be hard to show condition in these photos a lot of times. The photos that are here are generally indicative of the project. The finishes are basic and they are older and they are worn. If you look at the bottom of page 7, that's a pretty standard bedroom size for Manitoba Housing. And they are on the small side, as you can see. The property itself, location, the site is shown on page number 8. Somewhat more importantly, on page number 9, we get the aerial. Mr. Lucky had mentioned that it's in an area with schools appropriate for families. That is true. Manitoba Housing builds their properties where the need for their service is. Now, if you look at this specific area in and around River East Collegiate, there's a very high degree of social housing in this particular area, both Manitoba Housing and a few others in that, call it, segment circling River East. In fact, I have had another Manitoba Housing project located 2 properties to the east of this on the corner of Rothesay and Sutton, I suppose it is. that was a more standard apartment-style project in considerably worse condition. And immediately across the road from that project was a market apartment in very similar condition to the Manitoba housing on the other side of the road. So while it is a family neighborhood, and I'm not suggesting that the whole area is like that, there is that aspect of the location to be considered. So simply because it's a family area doesn't mean that the apartments are going to be in great shape and in good demand. Looking at the valuation, again, we did look at the suite mix and the rental rates assigned, as well as the expense allowance and the vacancy. This was all gone through, and as noted, we are in agreement with the values derived. Again, the unit sizes themselves are smaller. The bedrooms tend to be smaller. In Manitoba housing properties, the finish is more basic. So the rental rate on average of $947 per unit was appropriate. They do experience fairly standard vacancy. Yes, there is demand, obviously, for Manitoba housing, but they do have people come and go, as well as damage that you would get in all multifamily units out there. So assigning a standard vacancy rate of 2.6% is appropriate in the valuation. So ultimately we come down to the same net operating income of $100,647. Now, looking at capitalization rate, I'm not going to run through our material again. I would point out, yes, there are other sales out there in the marketplace, as Mr. Merritt was kind of getting at with regard to the cap rates that we provided on page 13. By and large, in the time frame leading up to the valuation, the majority of purchases on the marketplace were for renovation and repositioning in the marketplace of properties that were out there. So any cap rate based on in-place income is inappropriate and not indicative of cap rate paid for the net operating income in place. So we can't rely on those. And the information that we have here is based on actuals. There was no upside for these particular properties, so the capitalization rates developed are true indicators of what an investor would pay based on what they expect their return to be for the property in place. The point of including the main or two of the main commercial brokerages, their cap rate study, or rather cap rate report information, it's essentially an internal survey with some external input from the two of them. The point of including this is to, again, frame appropriate capitalization rates for valuation for multifamily properties in the marketplace. Now, these are investment brokers looking at the market and saying to both their investors and to their brokers internally, what are investors willing to pay for this type of product in our marketplace? And the ranges that they've developed are based on investment grade properties. So generally they're looking at the upper end of the marketplace. So you're looking at that set it and forget it type of purchase where we buy it, you have it managed by a professional property manager, and you pay 5.5%, 6%, whatever it is that you pay. That's what these rates are generally indicating. What we're looking at being social housing, public housing, and the issues that we've discussed extensively here. Even if you were to look at these ranges as presented by the market brokerages as being appropriate for the subject, which I would argue that they're not. They would have a premium to those. At a very minimum, they would be at the upper end of the range of what's indicated by the market brokerages. When we look at the City of Winnipeg capitalization rate chart, and we look at the multifamily section, and I think it's probably been explained by the city before, but there's really no breakdown between high-rise, low-rise, low-rise A, low-rise B. There's an overall range of 4 to 7.3% in all of those, and 4.9 to 5.3% in the 20th to 80th percentile. Now, I would estimate that there's probably some variability between the high-rise category and, say, your low-rise B. I would suggest that low-rise B is not going to be the same as high-rise typically, or low-rise A for that matter. So your starting point essentially is going to be towards the upper end of the range that we're indicating in our capitalization rate study, and certainly the upper end of the range as indicated by the market brokerages dealing in this particular market segment in selling multifamily property, and their knowledge of what investors will pay for investment grade property. So is Manitoba Housing investment grade property? It's not, and it would fall at a bare minimum at the upper end of those ranges, which essentially is 6% as indicated by the brokerages. Now, the subject, built in '88, smaller number of units at 17, somewhat more conventional unit counts at 2 and 3 bedrooms of 11 and 6. We have assigned a cap rate of 6% based on all of the factors considered. So capping the net income at 6% gives us our market value of $1,677,000. And again, if you look at the property itself, the finishes are at a lower level and generally have experienced more wear and tear. I would point you again to our addenda, which includes the IME, the actual reports from the brokerages, as well as supportive decisions with regard to Manitoba Housing in the 2020 assessment cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky, questions?
Just the only one question I have is, wouldn't 1988 be a fairly new building for apartment?
It would be a newer building, yes.
So it would be built with like 2x6 walls, more modern construction than 1970s?
It would be different construction, certainly, than early 70s.
No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. McPherson?
I have none, thank you.
Mr. Marks?
Nobody know.
I have none either, so summation, either party?
Oh, thank you.
All right, we're going to take about a 5-minute break.
Okay,
we're going to.
yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
We'll take 5, okay?
Thanks.
We'll call the meeting back to order, and we're going to go to the third item on the docket, which is 1425 Rothesay Street. So, Mr. Lucky, and I think because we covered off a lot of things, you can maybe summarize it, and I think if it's a matter of, if you're agreeing on NOIs, you can, state the cap rate, et cetera, and value, and Mr. Smith, you can probably do the same. Okay. So, Mr. Lucky, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. 1425 Rothesay is file number 19-3283. roll number 040017576000. We have a 1977. It's not 17 buildings. I'll have to change it. There's 17 units. I call these stacked townhouses. They're kind of a hybrid between townhouses and apartments. So it's not like a typical townhouse where they're all in a row. They kind of go over each other. The CMHC term is stacked townhouse. Anyway, so built in 77, and on page 2 there's a picture. And then the site plan, and again, same area we've talked about, close to schools and shopping and whatnot. Agree on the NOI, our cap rate being that it's 1975 and newer, is 5%, and I would ask that you maintain the assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leckie. Mr. Smith, questions?
Just the one, really. The last property we did at 331 Sutton was also 17 units in that same neighborhood, built in 88, with a higher number of bedroom count. They're both at 5% though in the model.
Right.
Okay, that's my only question.
I thank you. Mr. McPherson?
I have nothing, thank you.
Mr. Marks?
Nothing for me, thanks.
I thank you. I don't have any, so Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Okay, 1425 Rothsay. As mentioned, we're in the exact same neighborhood as the previous property on Sutton. This one was built in 1977 and is in certainly poorer condition than the previous one. The previous one had wear and tear from that. I'll try and be expedient here. We are looking at higher bedroom counts here. It's not 2 and 3 bedrooms only. We have 4 2-beds, 5 3-beds, 7 4-beds, and 1 5-bedroom unit here. So we're looking at 13 out of 17 units being 3+ bedrooms in the subject property. If you look at the condition of the property, beginning on page number 4, you can see some of the exteriors. When it was built, they were into that wood exterior cladding at that time, which has presented problems for many properties, and many of them are having to go through the removal and replacement of that. If you look at the interiors, obviously you can see the basic nature of the finishes, the fact that it hasn't been renovated, and the wear and tear that's present. So that's what we're looking at. I count 12 buildings, I guess, if you want to consider buildings that are somewhat detached, individual. They each have their own roof line. Certainly, so you got 12 buildings on site shown on page number 9, and the location is on page 10, just around the corner from the previous one, as well as the other 2 that I discussed. Our net operating income is the same, with an average of $1,073 for these units. Again, they are small for the number of bedrooms that they have. And we come down to the same net operating income of $105,087. Now, looking at the subject property with regard to cap rates, we have the same detail for you. When you look at this particular property, we have higher number of bedrooms, as mentioned. There is there is lower demand out there in the standard marketplace for these. Certainly there are some that are out there in the 3 and 4 bedroom range, but there's not a huge demand for these, and there is greater vacancy, etc. So you tend to have higher cap rates paid for both townhomes and higher bedroom counts in the marketplace. There's not a lot of sales to show you that, but it's certainly supported by theory as well as past evidence from prior cycles. If if you look at the capitalization rate evidence, again, we have a smaller number of units at 17, the same as the last property, same location. Certainly lower overall condition of the property and higher bedroom counts. We've used a cap rate of 6.25% with regard to the subject property. It was built in 77 again versus 88, which is only a single component of deriving the cap rate, but does form a small part of it. So our cap rate of 6.25% is reflective of all of these factors and gives us a final market value of $1,681,000. And I'm open for questions. Thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Lucky, questions?
No.
Mr. McPherson?
No, thank you.
Mr. Marks?
No, thank you.
All right. Either party want summation?
No, thank you.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay. Next one, Mr. Smith, is Talbot Avenue, which is 420. You probably withdrawing that?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so I don't think our secretary has anything, so you'll probably have to sign off on that. Okay. So we'll go to 460 Martin Avenue West. Mr. Lucky, whenever you're ready.
Uh, 460 Martin Avenue West is file number 19-4284, roll number 140-9999-7700. We have 14 buildings. These are side-by-sides, all in a row on the street. Sorry, check that. That's 7 buildings.
Yeah.
So I've actually numbered this brief. There's a few things we'd like to go through on this. Numbered the pages. So page 2 shows the site, and it's these 7 buildings going right from the dot. And site plan again on page 3. And page 4 is the front view of the side-by-sides. We agree on the NOI. Our cap rate is lower. It's a difficult property. It's in transition from a residential section because they're side-by-sides, and there is transition to multifamily on the income approach. So it's been done both ways. Page 11 is demolition permit. So one of the buildings, original buildings, was demolished and sold to Hydro. There's a station next to it, and I believe they replotted the project after the sale of that one side-by-side building. So I don't have information of what was there before. Anyway, it was sold to Manitoba Hydro. So, this sort of adds fuel to the fire that these buildings can be sold off and have been sold off individually. Especially here where we have a whole row, it would be easy to sever the... Page 13, this is an old previous brief done by the residential section at the previous hearing, previous assessment, and it compared these two other side-by-sides in the area. So anyway, we agree on the NOI, we disagree on the cap rate. This is a smaller project in square footage, that's why the lower cap rate. And again, there would be, could be easy redevelopment or sales as side-by-side building. So I would ask that you maintain our assessment of $1,575,000. So if you have any questions, happy to try and answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Lucky. Mr. Smith, questions?
No questions.
Mr. McPherson?
Yeah, I have a question. They demoed one of these side-by-sides?
There used to be one more building.
Where would that be? I'm looking at it, and the site coverage looks like there's 7 there.
Yeah.
Did they replot it? And
It's been replotted. So I don't know. I just assume that since Hydro bought it, this.
That was for a transmission line?
Well, I assume that it's for part of the station at the end. Like, if you look at my page 2, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 side-by-sides, and then there's the Hydro property. So my only guess is that it was there. So Hydro might have put this building where the side-by-side was. I'm just guessing, I don't know. But I know that one of the buildings has been sold. There used to be one more.
okay, but there's no contention. There are 7 units, and that's what's found.
There's 7 buildings, 14 units.
14 units, 7 buildings.
Yeah, I got to change this. We have 14 buildings, but it's 7 buildings.
Okay, and the reason it's got the lower cap rate, you said, was, is there a cutoff for?
The square footage is,
and these all have basements? I'm just looking at basement area, 6188.
oh, okay, yeah, I was
7140.
gonna say, I believe they do.
And does that come into consideration on establishing a cap rate?
Basements, no.
No.
But, just checking here. Okay, the 4.7 cap rate is for buildings between 8,000 and 15,000 square feet.
Where does that fall in with the subject then?
Be a lot less than that, would it not?
This gross floor includes the basement, I guess, so it would be, it would fall within the 8,000 to 15,000 square foot for the total.
Oh, the total,
Right,
not the total.
right. So,
So these are
it would be 13,000 and change the gross upper floor areas. And the 4.7 is between 8,000 and 15,000 square feet. Somewhat smaller apartments.
Okay, I thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Marks?
No, I just, thank you.
Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. A bit confused regarding that break point, but in any case. So, my comment with regard to the sale of demolition is that if you read the permit and then the back of the permit, it says duplex demolished and land ownership transferred from MHRC to Manitoba Hydro. So you have one government entity transferring a property to another for their use. It's not that it was sold on the marketplace, it's just that Hydro needed it and they got it transferred from Manitoba Housing. The other point is we don't have a duplex here. We have 14 units on a single title and a parcel. We're not selling, it's not duplexes, they're not going to be split off and sold for profit as individual duplexes. Single title, single roll number. So that is how the property needs to be valued. Looking at the subject, we have a total of 14 three-bedroom townhome units built in '77, again, Manitoba Housing, located in the Chalmers, Elmwood area. If you look at my page number 10, you can see the specific location towards that east end of Chalmers there, getting in towards the industrial area in that corridor just to the east of it. The property, as mentioned, has a Manitoba Hydro substation just immediately to the right of it, as one of our previous Manitoba Housing properties did as well. Not typically an attractive feature with regard to a location. The property being built in '77 has not gone through a renovation and is in relatively, certainly well below average condition. If you look at the exterior and interior photos, you can see the degradation of the exterior wood cladding, in desperate need of replacement. Interior finishes dating to the time of construction with their original basic nature, and the small size of the bedroom shown on page number 6 there. That's what we're dealing with. The net operating income, as indicated, we are in agreement with, looking at $918 for units of this size, in this condition, in this location. It is appropriate. So we come down to an NOI of $74,040. Now, in terms of capitalization rates, we are looking at 14 units. The previous two properties we were looking at were 17 units. This is a nominal difference. I don't see a significant difference in terms of size of these particular units versus the ones that we were looking at before. Perhaps the transfer from residential to multifamily has had some impact on the valuation. I'm not entirely sure how that has functioned. In any case, looking at the subject, yes, there's a smaller number of units at 14, so that would drive down your cap rate somewhat, and that there's more investors. However, it is in the condition as shown, somewhat poor condition, certainly. You have small unit sizes, very basic accommodation, lots of wear and tear, lots of deferred maintenance, 3-bedroom units, and essentially townhomes. They're side-by-sides, but they're townhomes. We have used the same capitalization rate that we did with the previous one, with similar condition and a higher number of bedroom count in the 4s and 5s for some of them. We've used the same capitalization rate of 6 1/4, so we haven't applied a premium to it. Again, we're looking at a smaller number of units here at 14. Same, last one was 17, so we're not making a real distinction there. But applying the cap rate of 6 1/4 gives us a market value of $1,185,000. And I'm open for questions.
I thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Leckie, questions?
Your page 3 of your report. Under the legal description, it has lots 18 to 32. If I'm counting right, that's 14 different lots of record. Wouldn't that make it easy to sell these properties if they're all on separate lots of record?
Lot of record, if I can get you to explain that to the board, to the panel.
Well, it's lots, part of lot 18 and all of lots 19 to 32. So those are all lots. And there's 14 of them, and we have 14 properties or sides. At the very least, you could do 2 sides without doing party wall agreements.
So, happy to answer the question.
I don't see the point here in going there.
Well, I'm just saying this, we've already sold one building.
Transferred. That's not sale.
Okay. But, we're in regards...
The distinction between this and the other one was 14 units scattered all over, less marketable individually than this, all in a row, all on separate lots of record.
I can answer the question.
Okay.
We can do it in a minute.
Okay.
So that's not what we're valuing. We're not valuing the potential future legal change to the ownership structure, subdivision, etc., all the costs involved, sale. That is not what's being valued today, and it's not what should be valued today. What we're valuing is the single roll number as it sits, and that's really it. That's how the assessment system is designed. If it were divided off and sold like that, then it would be reassessed, and any increase in value would be captured at that point.
That's how a purchaser would look at it, isn't it?
That's not what we're valuing.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Mr. McPherson?
Would that not, that circumstance, would that not come into consideration when you're determining the highest and best use?
Highest and best use for the property.
Right.
As to whether there would be maximally most economic benefit to the owner. So there are 2 different cases, right? You're looking at a change to the legal structure of the property where it's subdivided out and sold, which is not what the property is. So theoretically, you could look at that, but that's not what the intent of the assessment is. You could look at any property in that manner and say, well, we have an apartment building here, but we could theoretically condoize it, and we could say that each of these units is worth $300,000, and therefore it's worth 300,000 times 100 or whatever. It's just not how the valuation is done. That's a potential future action that is not in question at the point in time of the valuation for the property as it sits today, as valued at the market value date.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marks?
Yeah, just one question, and I've noticed this the last few times. For the cap rate, you're taking some of the examples that are more in the core area than in the areas that we're dealing with. And you're going with the cap rate that's showing there. You're showing a higher cap rate for not something that's in the core area.
With regard to the cap rate study that I have on page 14, that's what you're referring to?
That's correct,
yes. Okay. So there's, yes, certainly some of them you could consider core area. Balmoral, I believe Jameson is actually in the subject area. Lenora would be, again, more core area in the west end there.
And those are the ones with the higher cap rates. You're reflecting a 6.25.
Certainly some of them. Now, so I don't, I guess I want to emphasize that it's not, we're not looking at one individual component or one single sale in arriving at the appropriate cap rates. It's all the information that's been presented, considered as a whole. So certainly some of these would be in less attractive area. Now, Elmwood, Chalmers is certainly not an upper end area of the city. I wouldn't call it West End. I agree with you there. But taking everything into account, the cap rates that we're presenting, I'm certainly there's a lot of thought that goes into what is selected.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Summation to either party? No?
No, thanks.
Okay. Item number 6, 421 Thames. Mr. Lucky, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. 421 Thames is file 19-4297, roll number 14083281200. We have a 1973 townhouse Manitoba housing project built in 1973. We have 6 buildings and 36 suites. So we have pictures. Second page is typical street view. And page 3 is the site, which is backing on, I think that's Chalmers Community Center, and then whichever school's across the Chalmers. Is it Elmwood High, junior higher? It's a big school anyway.
Elmwood High.
Elmwood, yeah, I think I remember taking my son there for basketball. So again, these projects are all located near schools, community centers, that type of thing. And to the left, those are rental apartments I'm familiar with. Pretty good rents there. Page 3, we agree on NOI, and if you add the two together, in this case we've broken up the class code 10 and the class code 20 are same portioning and everything, it's just 10 is 4 units and less. So some of the other buildings where there's 4 units or less could have been class code 10 as well, but it has no effect. When you add the two NOIs together, we're the same as the applicant. Anyway, we have 5.3 as the cap rate. This is at the top end of the age group. 1974 is the top. And I would ask that you maintain the assessment, which is $106,000 per unit and 3.835. If there's any questions, be happy to try and answer them.
What was the total figure again? 3,008,000?
On the front cover, it's summarized.
Yeah.
There's
3,500.
3,409,
Okay.
426, 3835.
Okay.
However you split them, it
Yeah.
really doesn't matter
Okay.
in terms of taxation. Portioning is the same.
I thank you. Mr. Smith, questions?
I have no questions.
Mr. McPherson?
I have none, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Marks?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So 421 Thames, again, Manitoba housing property, built in 1973, total of 36 units, all townhomes, and we are dealing with a breakdown with, again, a higher number of bedroom counts. So if you look at my page number 3, it's got it outlined for you. 11 2-beds, 18 3-beds, 6 4-beds, and 1 5-bed. So we're looking at 25 out of 36 units being 3, 4, and 5 bedroom units out of the total. Property itself, built in 73, not undergone renovation since that time. You can see the photos beginning on page 4. As with the others that we've discussed, small bedrooms, very basic finishes, tile floorings, original cabinetry, etc. You can see the basic condition of the property from the photos there. And the site is shown on page number 9, as Mr. Lucky had indicated where it is. The aerial that we have is a little far out, but it's in an interesting area. It's kind of at that northern end of that pocket of Elmwood, and once you go, you look at the city's page number 3, I guess it is. Once you head a little bit further north on Watt, you're into an industrial section right there. Now, yes, there is the school, etc., nearby, and that is why the Manitoba Housing builds these facilities where they do, where there is a need for them. So, looking at the subject property, 36 suites, so we have a higher number of suites here. Certainly takes it out of that range of your smaller investor where you have a lot more purchasers for a product of this type. We're looking at, again, 25 out of 36 units being 3, 4, and 5 bedrooms, so on the higher end of the scale. And the condition of the property obviously is not stellar. It's comparable to the last couple that we were looking at there, below average certainly for the market. The units are smaller overall. The bedrooms are smaller. Finishes are older and worn, obviously. We are using a capitalization rate of 6.5% for the subject property, with the NOI we being in agreement with the city on the net operating income. using a capitalization rate of 6.5% gives us a final market value of $3,128,000. Now, again, certainly, while there is a school and community club nearby this particular section of Elmwood and Chalmers, I wouldn't necessarily see that as being a positive, this particular location for the subject. So our final market value is $3,128,000, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky?
Just one quick thing. I guess in these pictures of every property so far, but we're looking at this one specifically. Are these pictures all of the same unit?
No. No, typically, they're not of a single unit in the property.
So there was more than one vacant unit?
More than one unit was inspected, certainly, in the properties as we've gone through them. I can't tell you specifically which units the photos came from, but the pictures presented are indicative of the condition of the property, not of the worst unit or the best unit.
So you have 2 bedrooms, 1 kitchen, 1 hallway, 1 stairway, and 1 bathroom.
What we're trying to
They're in
show.
different buildings.
What we're trying to
Or
show.
different suites.
What we're trying to show is the overall condition of the property.
No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. McPherson?
I just wondered if you maybe prefer the rounded property assessment on page 17.
Is there a typographical
I imagine
error
it's a
that
typo, is it
I
not?
did not pick up on? Oh, yeah, that would be acceptable.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah.
I have nothing further, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marks?
No, nothing for me.
Okay, submission to the party?
No.
Okay, we'll go to Gordon Avenue, 265. Mr. Lucky?
265 Gordon is file number 19-4281. Roll number 140-837-50200. We have 1972, 9 buildings, 37 units. Total housing townhouse. I have second page is street view. Third page is site plan. Anyway, we're in the Elmwood area, and again, we've split up the class code 10 and 20, but the total is the same as Mr. Smith's, and we differ. This one's at 5.3 cap because it's at the top end of the 49 to 74 age category. I would ask. I would ask that you maintain the assessment. Total of $4,422,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
I have no questions.
Mr. McPherson?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Marks?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Mr. Smith? The floor is yours.
Okay, 265 Gordon. Again, Manitoba housing property, built in 1972, 37 total townhome units. The breakdown is shown on my page 3. And again, we have higher bedroom counts here and smaller overall unit size is certainly in Manitoba housing. 9 2-bedroom units, 17 3-beds, 7 4-beds, and 4 5-bedroom units in this particular property for a total of 37 units. So we're looking at we're looking at 28 units out of 37 units being 3, 4, and 5-bedroom units in this particular property here. Again, non-standard in the marketplace. Looking at the property condition is shown in the photos from pages 4 onwards. You can see some exteriors here with some needed repairs being done. Interiors of the units, generally they are original. You can see on page 6, original cabinetry, flooring, wear and tear on the walls, etc. On into page 8, similar, there was one unit where they had, that we had photos from, that they had done a renovation, a needed renovation to the to the kitchen due to damage, so that's shown at the bottom of page 9. Moving on, you can see the site on page 10, obviously very unique layout and design of the property. You can look at the aerial of it there. We're looking at don't really know how you would classify this as buildings. Each of those is going to have its own roof, etc. So while they're attached, it's a unique design is how I'll put it, with significant ongoing costs, I would estimate. Looking at the valuation, we are in agreement on the net operating income. Our average rental rate as applied by the city and ourselves is $1,165. Given the unit sizes and condition, I would estimate that this would be appropriate for the subject. The other allowances are the same, and we come to an NOI of $234,351. Given the location, unit count, condition of the property, and all of the other detail that we've discussed at length today, we're using a capitalization rate of 6.5%, which gives us our final market value of $3,605,000. The addendum materials, again, are there for you to review based on other Manitoba housing decisions from the 2020 cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky?
I have no questions.
Mr. McPherson?
None, thank you.
Mr. Marks?
None for me at all.
Summation to the party?
No, thank you.
Okay. We'll go on to the last one, which is Talbot Avenue, 326. Mr. Lucky?
Thank you. 326 Talbot is file number 19-4296, roll number 14091678000. We have 2 buildings. Should be 2 stories. And this project was built in 1978. There's 9 units. Second page is a street view of the front building. And then on the third page is site plan is the 2 buildings, the one at the front, which was in the other picture, and then the one at the back. So this is in the Elmwood area again, and we've looked at model, and we have agreed on the NOI at $45,073. We differ on the cap rate, and this is a smaller building. We have a 4.7, plus it's in the 1975 and newer category. That's, like I said, 4.7. Would ask that you maintain the assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions?
I have no questions.
Mr. McPherson?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marks?
None for me, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Thank you. 326 Talbot, again, owned by Manitoba Housing, built in 78. 9 total townhome units, 5 of them being 2 beds and 4 of them being 3 beds. This particular property, I did not gain access to view the interiors, unfortunately, so we have pictures of the exterior. However, we did get information back from the property manager, as we did on all of them, and the indication is that it hasn't gone through a refresh of any kind or anything of that nature. So the assumption is that it would be in similar conditions to ones of the same time vintage and of the same ownership that we've been looking at. So that is that particular, just wanted to make that clear up front. With regard to the subject property and valuation, yes, we are in agreement with regard to the net operating income. Market average rent of $869 for these particular units does seem appropriate given the location, size, unit, bedroom count, etc. for the subject. As Mr. Lucky mentioned, it is a smaller property at 9 units, somewhat more conventional at 5 2 beds and 4 3 beds. Condition, obviously, probably in below average condition. We can't speak specifically, other than the indication is that it has not undergone any renovation by Manitoba Housing. So we have used a capitalization rate of 6% for the subject, giving us our market value of $751,000. And again, 6% is essentially the top of the investment grade capitalization rate range as shown by the market brokerages in Winnipeg. So $751,000 is our market value, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky?
I just got one question. I guess the cap rate. So we're at 4.7, and all the properties here today, the lowest was 4.4 at 420 Talbot, so I can't figure out why you withdrew that one.
I don't recall the detail with regard to Talbot today, but it's not in question really, so.
Okay. I have no other questions.
Thank you. Mr. McPherson?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Marks?
None for me.
Okay. I think I don't have any either. Summation, either party? Okay.
No.
No, that's fine. I think I've heard enough today.
Okay. I think that concludes our hearing.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Mr. Smith, thank you very kindly for your presentations and results very soon. And Mr. Lucky, thank you kindly. And you're free to go.